Hey guys, I'm the 50s kid. This is my E46 BMW and it's leaking pretty bad. If you followed my last video, you know that I was driving along, smoke started pouring out the back, had to pull over. Oil was pouring down out of the bottom of the engine, so we had to tow it back here. And I went through the process of checking the oil pan gasket job that I previously did to make sure that I did that right. I did. So my conclusion now is that I've got a leaking rear main seal. It's actually leaking a lot worse than I would expect a rear main seal to be leaking, but I can't really think of anything else in that area. It's right at the rear of the engine where it's leaking. So, I'm gonna basically go through the process of changing that. Got to remove the exhaust, got to remove the drive shaft, got to pull the transmission back from the engine, and then we'll be able to take a look at the rear main seal and change it. So anyway, let's get started.
Let's make sure we disconnect the battery.
So there are a couple of prerequisites that you need to do. Of course, you've seen my common repair steps video. You know how to remove all these various things. So the specific things you need to remove are the fan and the fan shroud. That's because we're going to dip the engine down and lift it up during different points in this job. So if the fan was there, it would get in the way. Also remove the air filter box, because this just has to move freely. And we're also going to remove the heat shield back here. That's actually pretty easy to get out. You pull off the vacuum tube that goes to the brake booster, and then you'll just kind of be able to get that out. It's actually pretty easy. You don't have to remove anything else right here. The one thing we're going to remove that I don't show in that video is the blower motor cover back here. There are two Torx bolts that hold it on, so we're going to take those off and pull that out. That's because, again, the engine's going to move up and it'll have more room to kind of, the back of the engine will have more room to move back in there if that shield is not there. So we're going to pull that off. They are T30s. So we need to get the exhaust off first, and these here they're 15s, and these are probably going to be the hardest bolts for you to get off in the whole job, especially if you live in a rust belt. Hit them with penetrating fluid, and you might want to do that like the night before even. So we're going to jump to the rear muffler here and remove the exhaust hangers that are holding it up. There's one kind of hidden back up in here, and there's one right back here. Okay, so let's get you a closer look at that. We're going to start with this one up here. Yeah, there. Hopefully we can see it. It's just nicely hidden. There are 13 millimeter fasteners, by the way. There are two of them, one on either side of the hanger. And this one's easier to see. By the way, here's the rear exhaust. And you see that little door inside there? That's actually a little sort of like, well, it's a door that is actuated by this little vacuum controlled thing right here on top of it. And you can see that vacuum line back in there that's connected to it. You got to remove that when we drop the exhaust, or before we drop the exhaust. I probably just kind of broke it off instead, but that's what it is. And I'll just, once I get it down, I'll just remove the little section that I broke off the tip, and then just put this down on. In fact, I probably will replace this because it's, again, old and brittle, all that stuff. This is the middle section of the exhaust, and it's just held up by these two plates. These are all 13s. As you can see, I've got my jack underneath the suspension right here. This is just basically the midpoint of the suspension. This is so that it just doesn't drop down on my head. I'm going to lower it safely with the jack. Yeah, so that forward plate wasn't attached to the exhaust, but the rear plate is. I'll lower the exhaust a little, my jack. So the whole back of the exhaust has dropped off, and really, I just gotta pull it back off of the engine. And I think maybe it might be easier, for me anyway, if I do that from the back. Yeah, there we go. Feels like I pulled it back off of the headers. So now I'll just lower it down. So we've got to remove this exhaust shielding that was covering the drive shaft. There's a 10 mil bolt in the rear back here. There are two of them. The engine is this way. Here's the transmission right here. And there are two 10 millimeter fasteners holding the front on right here. To remove the drive shaft, first we have to remove the drive shaft center support bearing bracket. 213s. One thing I need to do now is get the transmission support bracket off, and I've got my jack positioned underneath the transmission with a block of wood just to support it. These are all 13s. There are two holding the bracket to the engine on the other side. I'm just going to peel this heat shield back, and there are two bolts for the mounts. So, all 13s. I've made sure to shift my transmission into neutral so that I can rotate the drive shaft. You see that there are 6 drive shaft bolts, but you only need to remove 3 of them because there's a steering gubo between the drive shaft and the transmission, this little rubber flex disc right here. So 3 bolts connect the drive shaft to the flex disc, and 3 bolts connect the flex disc to the transmission. I'm just gonna choose to remove the drive shaft from the flex disc. So those are these ones. They're 18 millimeters, and you need to hold the nut on the back. Just gonna use this swivel socket. Okay, so the center support bearing bracket, let's take a look at that. The center support bearing bracket right there is just sort of glued in with some sticky stuff, and that just kind of, you got to pull down on that first to get it loose, and then you can get the drive shaft out. I need the drive shaft to be just kind of held up out of the way right here, so I've got it hooked up here to an S-hook to just this little hole in the body. You can, you know, wire it up and pull the wire back to something, I don't know, tie it to the door handle, a couple different things you can do. So one thing I totally forgot to do was drain the ATF fluid. It's a 6 mil, or it's a, yeah, 6 millimeter hex head fastener. I've got the ZF transmission in case anybody is wondering. Look at that. It really is not lifetime fluid like they say. I don't know why they say that. So stupid. Let's see if I can raise the back of it up anymore. There. That way it's everything's sloped downwards to the drain plug there. Get it all out. That should be enough. So I want to get the transmission connector off, and you're supposed to turn it clockwise to get it off, but I really can't get access to it. So I'm going to pull the bracket off, which is right here. It's a 10. There we go. Much easier once you get that little bracket off. So next I want to pull the ATF cooler lines off of here. There's a 13 mil up in the back here. Use a long 13 mil wrench that I have. Switch to a gear wrench here. Okay, 13 mil bolt, and these lines should just pop out. Cool, and just drop down. Okay, we need to remove the shift linkage and the bracket that holds the shift linkage to the transmission. So this is a 13. This one you only need to loosen, because this, you know, just enough for this to pull out, which it will. And the bracket has 2 10s up above here. I believe I'm gonna need this little 1/4 inch to get access, because it's pretty tight. Well, that sucks. We're stuck. Let's see if we can lower this down any further. Okay, that's way down. Okay, so now I can just pull this linkage off. When you are doing this job on a manual transmission, you're not going to have these ATF cooler lines. And one thing that you do is, okay, so after you pull the transmission off, the engine's going to become front heavy, because the engine mounts are placed pretty far back. Okay, so if it's going to become front heavy, and the engine's going to want to drop. Now, one trick you can do is put a piece of wood between the sway bar and the front of the oil pan right here. That way it just, you know, you'll prevent it from dropping too far. And as you can see, the ATF lines are in the way right here, right? I'm gonna crush them if I put the piece of wood in there. So, you know, you could try to remove them and do this disconnect, but these are a pain in the ass to get off. So I'm thinking what I can do is just sort of, yeah, just kind of pull them down and out of the way. And now I'll stick my piece of wood, you know, up between here. This is actually too long. I got to cut it. But I would stick my piece of wood between here, and that'll, you know, that'll support the engine. Okay. There. So when the engine tips down, it'll support itself on that. I'm going to lower the transmission all the way down. Yeah, looks like I already had. So basically the engine's just like tipped so far back that it's now sort of, actually it's honestly, the oil pan is resting on the subframe. So you can see right here, there's this rubber mount right here that is between the subframe and the oil pan. So that's basically what the engine's sort of resting on right there. So we're gonna do the easy ones first. These are E10s. There are 3 of them, you can only see 2 here. All right, there's that 3rd E10, and I hope I can get enough leverage on it. Yay. Woohoo. Before we can get the transmission off of the engine, we actually have to unbolt the torque converter from the flex plate. And the way you do that is there's this little access thing in here. It's a little rubber thing, and you just kind of peel it away, right? And now you're going to be able to get at the bolts in there. We need to be able to rotate the torque converter around so we can get access to the bolts that are holding it to the flex plate. The way you do that is you got to rotate the flex plate, and you need a sort of a big screwdriver or a pry bar. And so, okay, I got 1 in view. Yeah, they're 17s. We've got to hold this so that it won't turn. There we go. She's loose. Never a phrase you want to say out loud unless you're working on a car. Well, no. Okay. Ow. Watch your knuckles. Okay, here's the last one. Every time. Just be careful you don't drop these bolts down in here, particularly when you're putting it back on. Just like that. That would be really bad when you're taking it, when you're basically putting it back on. So obviously I'll have to wait to get that out until I pull the transmission, but yeah, don't do that. So it looks like there's one bolt that we can get on the bottom of the bell housing. These are, the rest of the bolts left are E16s. So. That sucker's on there. All right, big long sucker. Looks like there's another cable plugged into the back of the transmission right here. And you just get it out like that. The little, the boot on the end is kind of crumbled on mine. Looks like it's clipped in to the top there. Probably gonna try to leave the clip and remove the cable. That way I don't forget where the clip goes. I think there's a second clip. I'm not sure if you guys can see this, but yeah, it just clipped in up at the top there. Okay guys, I do apologize, but there's just no way that I can film this. There are 1, 2, 3, and 4 bolts, I believe, that I need to get off. E16s. I've got some really long extensions here. I've got 4 6-inch extensions going. Various, like one converter as well, going from 3/8 to 1/2. So, which is kind of crazy. Oh, wow. Pressing forward really hard. And we're just losing so much torque that this thing just can't do anything. And this thing can do 800 foot-pounds, by the way. Well, I think what I need is a bunch of 1/2-inch extensions. I think that's the problem here. I'm gonna see if I can go to Harbor Freight. Hey, we can see me. I'm gonna see if I can go to Harbor Freight, see what kind of half-inch extensions I can buy, because I actually don't own a big set of long half-inch extensions. So I'm gonna go see if I can get that, see what I can put together, because I think 1/2-inch extensions are gonna have a lot more rigidity to them, and they're not gonna twist and give up as much torque as the 3/8 ones. Anyway, that's where I'm at. So I kind of lost some of the light while I was out getting a new tool, and I'll show you that in a second. I just cracked one of the bolts before I forgot to turn on the camera. So here's the next one up. It was the lower one here. This next one up is one of the starter ones, and that got cracked, so that's good. Now the top starter one, and that one was like really easy. Now the really hard part here is going to be the bolt that's on this side. I can't even get on it because it's up so high in the corner. there's just not a straight path through to actually get on it. Like the bulkhead is in the way. What I need to do, honestly, is sort of just move the whole engine over this way, but it's not even possible. Okay, so here's what I purchased. It was a set of these, and they were just long extension bars, locking extension bars. Okay, so I'm using the one I have from that. I'm using this one that I already have. It's just it's an impact locking extension. I guess it's probably 6-inch. I think this is an 8-inch one. I already had this. The set that I have came with this only in non-impact form. So I mean, I have this out already, so I'm using it. I'm just using these two as my main extensions to get in there. And then I'm using this little swivel right here extension right on the end of that, because I have to go from 3/8 to, or I have to go from 1/2 inch to 3/8 because my E16 socket is 3/8. But anyway, hopefully that'll give me enough swivel to get on that one bolt on the side there. By the way, I did spray all of these with penetrating fluid just now before I cracked them, and that seemed to help. Okay guys, here's a view from below on that bolt. It's the only one left for me. Just trying to get up and on it. Actually, in such a way that I'm really on the bolt. I feel like I am now, and have enough room to turn and torque. Let's see what we can do. Wow, that was a lot. No, can't do it. Oh, I got it. You know what? I must have been twisting the wrong way the first time. I think I was. That's why I tried it again. My impact socket better be, my impact driver better be within reach, I gotta tell you. Yes, it is. Is it all the way out? Damn thing better be. Okay guys, this is the only view I've got for you right now because I'm super tired, super frustrated. Everything is really heavy. After struggling with this stuff for a while, everything just becomes really heavy. Maybe it's because I don't do this every day. Okay. I'm gonna think that that's out. Okay, it feels like they're all out. I just want to double check them while I got this all put together. Okay, they must be out. You know what? I think that there's one more bolt on the top there that I missed. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There are 5 bolts. Okay, let's see if the impact can just do it by itself. Nope. All right, I'm on there now. It's going the right way, and it cracked free. I love that sound. Okay, so now we're falling, which ain't good. I gotta get something under this to support it. So what I'm hoping is that my jack is just right in the middle of the weight of the transmission. Just hoping the thing doesn't tumble off of it, you know? Okay. That has to mean that all of the bolts are now free. And I can just pull this off. I think it does mean that. I think what I want to do is raise it up a little more though, because I think right now we're tweaking it downward. So now that I have all the bolts off, I'm going to raise the transmission up a little, just get it more level. That way it can pull off the engine a little more level, I think. I can see the torque converter starting to drip. I think I can do this from this end. Yeah, look at that. It's just kind of sliding off there. I'm gonna try to. I'm gonna make sure that my wooden block is positioned under the engine, where you guys saw I had it before, for when that engine tips. Maybe I'm up a little too high. That was the the missing flywheel or flex plate bolt that fell out there. There's just a bracket on the side of this thing. Nobody ever mentioned this, ever. You guys can actually see this. This is in plain view. So hopefully you guys can see that bolt right there. That is holding that little thin sort of, I don't know, is it a gasket? Whatever. It's a little thin piece of metal that's between the transmission and the engine, but it's behind the flex plate, and it's preventing, I mean, the flex plate is still bolted to the engine, and if that's behind it, I mean, that needs to stay with the engine, but you see there's a bolt right there that is bolting it to the transmission, and that bolt is just holding those oxygen sensor wires out of the way. So I need to remove that bolt and get that bracket off of there. Can't hold the camera can't be there while I'm doing that because I need to be there. So that's what I'm doing, that's what I'm getting rid of. Okay, one little 10mm bolt. It's peeing all over me. I mean, most of the oil is in the torque converter, it seems like. Hey, vey. Wondering what we're hung up on. Okay, this thing is just... It's just peeing everywhere. I've just got to let it leak. It's just... we got to let it leak out. Clean it up afterwards. Well, guys, I'm sorry it happened off camera, but it did happen. Got the thing out of there. It sort of fell over towards the passenger side because I didn't quite have my jack positioned quite right. I would say that this is definitely a very difficult thing for one person to do. I probably should have had a transmission jack if I wanted to do this all by myself like I did. Who knows, I might even need to get one to put it back up into place. Okay, got a couple of notes for you guys. The starter bolts, the two starter bolts right here, these are not E16s, they're E12s. And I don't know how I got them off okay with an E16. That was actually pretty darn surprising to me, but it worked. I didn't screw them up. This one on the top right here is longer than all of the other ones, as you can see. So this is and the guy down here, this one down here seems to be a little shorter. Actually, no, it's the same size. It's just that it's thicker down here at the bottom, so it doesn't stick out as far. But yeah, top one is the really long one. So I went ahead and I pulled out the torque converter. The torque converter is just splined onto the transmission output shaft. It's not bolted to it or anything. So as you can see, I've just got the torque converter draining in my drain pan here. It's really heavy. It was surprisingly heavier than I thought it would be. Okay, so it's time to get the flywheel bolts off. They are 19s. And the way you do this by hand is you got to slip a pry bar up between two of them. And you need a breaker bar in order to get them cracked. And you just kind of do like that. I've already got these top two sort of cracked. And yeah, you just give it a shove and you'll get it done. Just a little faster. I'd already cracked that one. Be prepared because it's heavy, somewhat. Okay, it's not really gonna fall then. We've got the plate, little spacer, and the flywheel. There we go. This is another spacer right here for the starter. This is what was bolted to the transmission, and it's stuck on the locating dowels right here. But yeah, it just comes off. There's the starter up here, just sitting free now. And this is our rear main seal right here. It's actually stuck inside of the seal carrier. So that's bolted to the engine and 6 bolts here, and then these 2 oil pan bolts bolt up into it. So we've got to remove these 2 and these 6, and we'll be able to pull this right off. These are 13s. And the rest are 10s. Okay. Now, I know I've changed my oil pan gasket recently. If you haven't, you might possibly damage your gasket by sliding this off because the gasket sticks out here. And if your gasket is old and cracked, you're probably going to crack it, so just be prepared for that. This needs to be replaced. And who knows what was really leaking. Maybe this gasket. There's definitely oil on the back of it. There's oil on the front of it, around it. And the rear main seal, I've got oil down here. Alrighty guys, finally got my seal in. It's a Cortico. Supposedly it's the OEM brand, but I don't know. It has the installation tool, which just kind of compresses the seal so that you can just easily slide it right over the crank. Apparently you can do it, you can get this over the crank without that. You just would have to be really careful, probably use a very thin, I would use like a plastic pry tool maybe to just kind of, you know, bend the corners back a little and kind of work it onto the seal as you're getting it on there. But that seems a little, I don't know, I didn't want to mess with that, so I got the little installation tool. So I'm going to examine this thing up close here, and it looks like the old seal is flush with these surfaces right here. Okay? And on the inside, the back edge of the seal is actually, it's not flush with the back right here. This back surface, there's a little bit of spacing there. So I just want to make sure that the new seal, when I put it in there, is flush with that. So I've got some old brake rotors, which should hopefully do the trick. Yeah, there we go. See, we would use this installation tool, we'll stick it up through here. The seal is supposed to go on dry, by the way, according to the instructions. Got a new gasket for the back, so we're all good, we're all ready. So let's talk flywheel bolts. You're supposed to replace them. They're stretch bolts, torque to yield fasteners, and they have thread locker pre-installed on them, right? You're supposed to replace them. Does everybody in the world replace them? Probably not, but I just decided to go ahead and replace them. Went to the BMW dealer and got 8 new ones. They were like $318 each. I probably got overcharged. Who knows? But, you know, it's a lot of work to get at these particular bolts. So if I'm wrong, if something loosens up, I mean, that's a pretty critical area, right? All right, now it's time to reassemble. I've already cleaned out the old RTV that was along the 2 corners here and put down a new bead. If you haven't changed your oil pan gasket yet, it's probably going to be cracked and no good. So, you know, if you kind of get your head up in there, you'll see it. I would suggest putting just a thin bead of RTV all along the bottom half of the main seal here, the main seal housing. That way you're just taking some precautions there. So got my new gasket, Let's go up behind. And you can see what a tight fit that is. So having this little installation tool totally helps. If you buy the kit for this, it's going to come with new bolts. According to the Bentley manual, the only bolts that need to be new are these two lower ones. And those would be the two that actually have thread locker compound on them. And I'm betting that's the reason they say you should use new bolts. I guess they don't think people have thread locker compound, but I do. So I'm reusing those. I don't see any problem with that. Just running them down, basically. Same for these, although I think because of that thread locker, I don't want to use my impact. I just want to be able to feel this. Feel what kind of resistance I got. It looks like I got none. I was worried about when I put this one in, I could feel a little stiffness. So I couldn't tell if that was just the old thread locker on the bolt or if there was some residual thread locker in the threads. Torque-wise, these are going to be torqued to 16 foot-pounds. Top ones are 7 foot-pounds. These bottom ones are also 7. You can see it squeeze the oil pan back on there. This plate goes back up and on. I've cleaned it off. Not exactly sure what we call this. Spacer plate. Something. Flywheel back on. We had this spacer. Looks like there's one elongated hole, so that's got to be for the locating dowel. Now this will only be lined up a certain way. If you was noticing earlier, if you tried to go like that, the holes wouldn't line up even when, you know, these 3 holes were in the center of where they should go. These holes wouldn't line up. Let's see if it lines up here. No, see, again, it doesn't line up there. So it only goes on one way, like that. You can see little scrape marks here where my tool, where my socket scratched it when I was getting them off. Got my new bolts. Not going to use these to actually torque them down. I'm just gonna, or use this to torque them down. I'm just gonna tighten them. We'll do crosswise anyway. So the torque is 77 to 85 foot-pounds. I've just sort of split the difference, I guess. And gone for about 81 foot-pounds, I believe. So it's just like before. Yeah. Tough to get a good swing on these. Okay, that did crack, and I had previously done this one. I'm just doing it in a star pattern. Ah, finally.